What if a single moment of weakness led to a secret so dangerous it threatened to unravel everything you had built? That night, I didn't just open a door, I opened Pandora's box. And when my fiancé's brother walked in, the truth I had been hiding was about to be exposed, forever changing the course of our lives. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a ticking time bomb. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the end and hit the like button. This story is going to be incredibly intense. I wasn't expecting anyone to be home that night. The house was quiet, dimly lit by the warm glow of a few scattered lamps. Outside, the rain pattered softly against the windows. I had poured myself a glass of wine, something rich and red, and settled into the solitude of my room. A rare indulgence these days. Loneliness has a way of creeping in when you least expect it, doesn't it? Ethan, my fiancé, was away on another business trip, something I had long since grown used to. But this time I wasn't just lonely. I felt restless, on edge, an ache stirring inside me that no amount of self-control could quiet. So I made a choice, a private one. Something to fill the void, even if only for a little while. I had just begun when I heard the faintest noise outside my door. At first I thought it was the wind rattling the old frame, or perhaps the house settling, but then I heard it again. Footsteps. My pulse quickened, but I told myself it was nothing. My fiancé's brother, Liam, had mentioned going out with friends earlier, and there was no reason to think he'd come back so soon. And yet I froze when I heard his voice, soft but close. "Olivia, are you okay in there?" Panic swept over me. The room was dark except for the faint flicker of the TV screen. I fumbled with the remote, trying to switch it off, but my hands betrayed me, trembling with urgency. Then came the sound, the unmistakable, damning sound, louder than ever. "Olivia," his voice again, even closer this time. Before I could find the words to send him away, the door creaked open. I hadn't locked it. There he was, standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, neither of us moved, caught in a web of shock and embarrassment. I don't know what I expected him to do, turn away, laugh, maybe even say something cutting, but what I saw in his expression was something else entirely. "I thought something was wrong," he stammered, his gaze flickering between me and the screen before darting away. "It's not what it looks like," I blurted, though my burning face and scrambling hands told a different story. Except, it was exactly what it looked like. The tension in the room was suffocating, like a fragile thread pulled tight and ready to snap. Finally, Liam cleared his throat and muttered, I should go." But he didn't. Instead, he lingered for just a moment longer, as though he couldn't bring himself to look away. And in that instant, something shifted. It wasn't just the embarrassment or the awkwardness. It was the unspoken understanding that neither of us would forget what had just happened. When the door finally closed and I was alone again, I sat there in silence, the wine glass still clutched in my hand, my heart pounding. Not from fear, but from something deeper, something I didn't want to name. That night I told myself it was just a mistake, a fluke. But deep down, I knew better. Some lines once crossed can never be redrawn, and this was only the beginning. When Liam moved back home, I expected the same reserved, distant young man I had met years ago when Ethan and I got engaged. But at 25, he wasn't a boy anymore. He carried himself differently now, with a quiet confidence and an easy charm I hadn't noticed before. He had grown into himself, and though I told myself it was inappropriate to notice such things, I couldn't help but feel a pang of awareness whenever he was around. That awareness nagged at me after our first encounter. It wasn't just the embarrassment of him catching me in such a vulnerable moment. It was the look in his eyes, the curiosity, the way he hesitated, as though something about what he had seen intrigued him as much as it mortified him. I avoided him for the next few days, retreating into the kitchen when I heard his footsteps or pretending to be busy in the garden. But Liam, it seemed, was determined to bridge the awkwardness. One evening, as I was washing dishes, he knocked on the kitchen door. "Hey," he said, leaning casually against the frame. "I didn't mean to scare you the other night." I kept my eyes fixed on the soapy water, letting the warmth be a welcome distraction. "It's fine. I should have locked the door." "You don't have to explain," he said quickly. "I mean, everyone deserves their privacy." There was a beat of silence before he added, "But you seemed upset. Are you okay?" The question caught me off guard. It had been years since someone had asked me that, really asked, as though they cared about the answer. Ethan was often too preoccupied with work, and I had long since learned to bury my feelings beneath the veneer of a perfect fiancé. "I'm fine," I said too quickly, then softened. "Thank you for asking." He nodded but didn't move. His presence filled the small kitchen, and I felt the air between us shift, charged with something unspoken. The tension didn't break, it lingered, wrapping around us in subtle, insidious ways. Over the next few weeks, Liam and I fell into a strange rhythm. He was attentive in ways Ethan had never been. He'd offer to help me with small tasks, bringing in groceries, fixing a leaky faucet, or simply sitting with me on the porch as the sun set. One evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on the back deck, he surprised me with a question. "Do you ever get lonely, Olivia?" I paused, the glass halfway to my lips. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Ethan is gone a lot, and it seems like you don't have many people to talk to." His words struck a nerve I hadn't realized was there. "That's not true," I said, more defensively than I intended. Liam shrugged, his gaze steady. "I'm just saying. I'm here, if you ever need someone to talk to or not talk to, whatever you need." There was something disarming about his honesty. It wasn't pity, it was understanding. It happened again late one night. I had gone downstairs to fetch a glass of water, only to find Liam sitting in the living room, illuminated by the glow of the TV. He looked up as I entered, his expression softening when he saw me. "Can't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not really. Want to join me?" I hesitated, then finally sank into the chair across from him. The silence between us was comfortable at first, but then he turned off the TV and leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "About the other night," he began, his voice low. I tensed. "Liam, we don't need to talk about that." Maybe not, he agreed, but I can't stop thinking about it. My breath caught. Liam stood then, crossing the room to sit on the edge of the coffee table, just inches from me. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, Liam said, his voice barely above a whisper, but I think you feel it too. The weight of his words hung between us, undeniable and terrifying. I opened my mouth to protest, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth betrayed me. I couldn't deny it anymore. That night was the first time we crossed the line. It wasn't planned and it wasn't logical, but it was inevitable. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments and whispered promises. We told ourselves it was just a fling, something fleeting to fill the emptiness. But the more time we spent together, the harder it became to pretend it wasn't something deeper. Liam was intoxicating in a way I hadn't experienced in years. He made me feel seen, alive, desired. But with every secret touch and lingering glance, the risk grew. Ethan was due home in a few weeks, and though we were careful, the strain of secrecy began to wear on both of us. One afternoon, as we returned from a discreet outing to a nearby park, we were caught off guard by an unexpected visitor. Naomi, Liam's ex-girlfriend. She stood on the front porch, arms crossed, a sly smile playing on her lips. "Liam," she drawled, "long time no see." Her eyes flicked to me, lingering just a second too long. An uneasy chill crept down my spine. "Naomi," Liam said, his tone carefully neutral. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, just thought I'd stop by," she said sweetly, though her expression betrayed her ulterior motives. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately." As she spoke, her gaze shifted between us, and I knew, somehow, she knew. This marked the beginning of our unraveling. Naomi's presence was a threat neither of us had anticipated, and her cunning was sharper than either of us realized. She had a knack for prying into things that didn't concern her, and it wasn't long before she started asking questions neither Liam nor I wanted to answer. As the stakes rose, so did the tension. While I tried to maintain the facade of a normal life, the cracks were beginning to show. Naomi's reappearance had thrown everything off balance. She claimed her visit was spontaneous, but I could feel the calculation behind every word she spoke, every glance she cast my way. Her eyes lingered just a second too long on Liam when she thought I wasn't looking, her smile carrying an edge that felt more like a warning. Liam and I tried to carry on as if she didn't unsettle us. We told ourselves she was just a distraction, a relic from his past that had no bearing on the connection we were building. Still, her arrival gnawed at me. A week later, Ethan called to tell me his business trip was being extended. His voice was distant, more focused on the work he had to manage than the woman waiting for him at home. "I'll be back in 2 more weeks, maybe 3, he said, almost as an afterthought. I told him to take care of himself, my tone calm and measured. Inside, I felt a pang of guilt and relief. That night a storm rolled in. Rain came in heavy sheets, drumming against the roof and windows. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the power flickered once before going out completely, plunging the house into darkness. I lit a few candles and tried to settle with a book, but my nerves were on edge. When I heard Liam's voice calling from downstairs, "Olivia, you okay up there?" "I'm fine," I called back. just trying not to trip over anything. A moment later, his flashlight beam lit the staircase as he climbed up to join me. The power company said it might be a few hours, he said. Mind if I hang out up here? I hesitated before nodding. Sure, if you don't mind the candles. He grinned. Better than sitting alone in the dark. We ended up sitting on the living room floor, wrapped in a shared blanket as the storm raged outside. Liam had brought a bottle of whiskey from the kitchen, and we passed it back and forth, letting its warmth take the edge off the chill. Do you ever wonder what you'd be doing if you weren't here? He asked suddenly. I frowned. What do you mean? If you hadn't married Ethan, if you weren't stuck in this house all the time. The question startled me. I'm not stuck, I said, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Liam raised an eyebrow. Aren't you? Ethan is never here. You don't seem happy. I don't know. I think you deserve more than this. My heart twisted at his words. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was perfectly content. But as I opened my mouth, the truth came tumbling out instead. I don't know what I'd be doing, I admitted. Sometimes I think about it, what my life would have been like if I'd made different choices. But it doesn't matter now, does it? This is my life. Liam leaned closer, his expression soft but intense. It doesn't have to be. The air between us was heavy, charged with the same tension that had been simmering for weeks. I should have stopped it. I should have walked away, but instead I let myself be drawn in. When his hand brushed against mine, I didn't pull back. In the days that followed, our stolen moments became more daring. Liam and I found excuses to leave the house together. A trip to the farmer's market here, a hike on a secluded trail there. It wasn't just about the thrill of being together. It was the way he looked at me, like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. It was the way he listened when I spoke. The way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, we ended up at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. The place was nearly empty, and we sat in a booth tucked away in the corner, our knees brushing beneath the table. I feel like I'm living someone else's life, I said, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. Liam tilted his head, studying me. Why do you say that? Because this isn't who I am, I said quietly. I'm not the kind of person who does this. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. Maybe you are. Maybe you just didn't know it until now. I wanted to believe him, but Naomi wasn't done with us. Liam had told her we were just family, that there was nothing going on between us, but she didn't buy it. One evening, as I was returning from the grocery store, I found her car parked outside the house. My stomach dropped. When I stepped inside, I found her in the living room with Liam, her voice raised in accusation. You're lying to me, she said. I can see it all over your face. Naomi, you're being ridiculous, Liam said, his tone calm but firm. Her gaze snapped to me as I entered. You're part of this, aren't you? What's going on between you two? I forced myself to stay calm. Naomi, this isn't appropriate. Oh, I think it's very appropriate, she said, her voice dripping with venom. You think I don't know what's going on? I've seen the way you look at each other, Do you really think you can keep this a secret? My heart pounded, but I refused to let her see me falter. You're mistaken, I said evenly, and I think it's time for you to leave. Naomi's smile was sharp and cold. Oh, I'll leave, but this isn't over. Naomi's expression darkened, but after a tense moment, she grabbed her purse and stormed out. As the door slammed shut, I let out a slow breath, my hands shaking at my sides. Liam was already watching me, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. The tension in the room was suffocating, pressing down on us like a heavy weight. She knows, I said quietly. Yeah, he murmured. She does. We stood there in silence, the weight of our choices settling around us. Naomi wasn't just going to walk away. She was waiting for us to slip, to make a mistake. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time. But she doesn't have proof, Liam replied, though he didn't sound convinced. It doesn't matter, I said. She's not going to let this go. Liam reached for my hand. We'll figure it out together. His words were meant to be comforting, but the weight of guilt was growing heavier by the day. Every time I saw Ethan's face on a video call, every time I thought about the life I was risking, it became harder to justify what we were doing, and yet I couldn't stop. The threat lingered over us like a storm cloud. Naomi didn't have proof, but her sharp instincts and relentless nature made her dangerous. And Liam, dear, sweet Liam, believed that ignoring her would make her go away. It's just talk, he assured me one evening, his arm draped over the back of the couch as we sat close together. It's not just talk, I snapped, pulling away from him. You didn't see her face when she left. She knows, Liam. She's looking for a way to destroy us. And what do you want me to do? Pay her off? His frustration flared but fizzled as quickly as it rose. I'll handle her, Olivia. I promise. But I wasn't convinced. Naomi wasn't the type to be handled. Before Liam had a chance to act on his promise, Ethan came home early, 3 days ahead of schedule. I was in the kitchen when I heard the front door creak open, followed by his heavy footsteps. My stomach dropped. Liam was upstairs, and while there was nothing incriminating in the house, the sheer proximity of the two men made my pulse race. Olivia, Ethan called, his voice rough from travel. I forced my tone to sound cheerful, wiping my hands on a dish towel as I turned to greet him. He stepped into the kitchen, setting his suitcase by the door. His face looked more tired than usual, the lines around his mouth deeper. You didn't tell me you were coming back early, I said. Got through the meetings faster than I expected. His eyes scanned the room. Is Liam around? The question caught me off guard. Ethan had never shown much interest in Liam's comings and goings before. He's upstairs, I think, I said carefully. Ethan grunted and poured himself a glass of water. I saw Naomi's car parked out front the other day when I called to check in. What's that about? My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my expression neutral. I didn't see her. Maybe she stopped by to talk to Liam. Ethan nodded but didn't press further. Still, his mention of Naomi left a sour taste in my mouth. It didn't take long for Naomi to reappear. One evening, while Ethan was out running errands, I found her waiting on the front porch when I came home from a walk. Her arms were crossed, her eyes glinting with malice. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady as though she knew she had the upper hand. I considered ignoring her, but the determination in her stance told me she wouldn't leave without a confrontation. "What do you want, Naomi?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as I could. She smirked. "Straight to the point. I like that." She paused before adding, "I want Liam." Her words were sharp and unapologetic, and in that moment I knew exactly where this was headed. "Whatever this is between the two of you," she continued, "it's not going to last. So why don't you step aside and let him come back to me?" I laughed bitterly. "Liam is a grown man. He can make his own decisions." Her smile widened. "Of course he can. But how do you think Ethan would feel if he knew about your little arrangement? Or the rest of the world, for that matter?" My throat tightened. "You wouldn't." Naomi leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "All it takes is one little text. A picture here, a message there, and your perfect little life comes crashing down." That night I told Liam everything. "We have to stop her," I said. "If she tells Ethan, it's over for both of us." Liam nodded, his jaw set. "I'll talk to her. I'll make her understand." But when he returned from their meeting the next day, his face was pale, his hands clenched into fists. "She's not backing down," he said. "She wants money, lots of it." My stomach turned. "How much?" 50,000, he said. "She says it's for her silence." "We can't give her that," I said, pacing the room. "She'll just come back for more." Liam stood abruptly, frustration boiling over. "Then what do you suggest, Olivia? Because I'm out of ideas." I didn't have an answer. Desperate, I turned to my closest friend, Claire. She'd always been sharp and resourceful, and though I hated dragging her into this mess, I didn't see another option. When I told her the truth, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Olivia," she said slowly, "do you have any idea how much trouble you're in?" "I didn't plan for this to happen," I said, tears welling in my eyes. "It just happened." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Okay, let's think this through. Naomi's a problem, but she's not invincible. There has to be something we can use against her." It turned out there was. Claire dug into Naomi's past, uncovering a trail of unpaid debts and a recent brush with the law. Armed with this information, we devised a plan to force her hand. The confrontation took place in a neutral location, a coffee shop on the edge of town. Claire and I waited at a corner table, the tension between us palpable. When Naomi arrived, she looked confident, almost smug. "I'm flattered," she said, sliding into the seat across from us. "Didn't think you'd have the guts to face me." "We're done playing your game," Claire said, sliding a folder across the table. Naomi opened it, her expression faltering as she took in the contents. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. "That's not important," Claire said coolly. "What is important is that we know who you really are, and if you keep pushing, we won't hesitate to make this public." Naomi's composure cracked, but she recovered quickly. "You think this scares me? I have nothing to lose." "Maybe," I said, "but Liam does, and so do I. So here's the deal. You walk away, and we won't come after you. But if you so much as breathe a word to Ethan or anyone else, We'll make sure everyone knows the truth about you." For a moment, I thought she might call our bluff, but then she stood, the folder clutched tightly in her hands. "You'll regret this," she said before storming out. Naomi's departure should have been a relief, but it left behind a trail of destruction. Liam and I were more careful than ever, but the weight of what we'd done was impossible to ignore. Ethan began to notice the tension. His gaze lingered on me longer than usual. "Is something going on?" he asked one evening as we sat in the living room. "No," I said quickly. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged. "You've been distant lately, and Liam seems different too. I just hope everything's okay." The guilt was suffocating. For a few days after Naomi left town, things seemed calm. Liam and I kept our distance while Ethan was home, speaking only when necessary, careful not to let our closeness betray us. But the unease lingered. The cracks were showing. One evening, Ethan asked me to join him for dinner at a new restaurant in town, a rare occurrence given his usual workaholic tendencies. I agreed, though I wasn't sure if I was more anxious about leaving Liam alone or about spending hours pretending everything was fine with Ethan. I've been feeling like we've grown apart, Ethan said over appetizers, his tone cautious. I froze, the glass of wine halfway to my lips. "What makes you say that?" He hesitated, swirling his drink. "I don't know, maybe it's the stress from work, but it feels like you're somewhere else lately, like your heart's not in it anymore." Guilt washed over me, but I forced myself to smile. "You've been busy, Ethan. Maybe we just need to make more time for each other." He nodded, though his expression didn't lighten. The reprieve was short-lived. 2 days later, a package arrived in the mail, addressed to Ethan. I found it on the kitchen counter when I came home from running errands. The sight of Naomi's handwriting on the envelope made my heart plummet. I tore it open, my hands trembling. Inside was a USB drive and a note. "Thought you'd like to see what your wife and brother have been up to." The implications were clear. Panic surged through me as I shoved the note and USB into my pocket. If Ethan had seen it first, I couldn't let myself think about what might have happened. I called Claire immediately. "She's still playing games," I said, pacing the living room. "I thought we scared her off," Claire said, her voice sharp with frustration. "So did I. Do you think Ethan saw it?" "No, I got to it first," I replied. "But we need to destroy it. Whatever's on that drive can't exist." Later that night, when the house was quiet, I locked myself in the study and plugged the USB into Ethan's computer. My hands shook as I clicked through the files, photos, videos. Nothing explicit, but enough to suggest what had been happening, enough to ruin everything if Ethan ever saw them. I deleted the files and crushed the USB under my heel, but the damage was already done. Naomi wasn't going to stop until she had destroyed us. The next morning, I confronted Liam. "She's still coming after us?" I said, my voice tight with worry. His expression darkened. "I'll handle it." "No," I said firmly. "We need to end this for good." Liam looked at me, his jaw tight. "How do we do that?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but we can't keep waiting for her to strike." Claire came through again, digging deeper into Naomi's life. She uncovered something I hadn't expected. Naomi had been fired from her last job for embezzlement. Armed with this new information, I devised a risky plan. Liam and I arranged to meet Naomi at a motel on the edge of town, far from prying eyes. She arrived late, her expression smug as she sauntered into the room. "Miss me?" she said, dropping her purse onto the bed. "We're done playing games," I said, standing my ground. Her smirk faltered. "Oh, are we? That's cute." Liam stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "We know about the money you stole from your last job. We know everything." Naomi's confidence wavered, but she recovered quickly. "So what? You think anyone's going to believe you? You're the ones with something to lose, not me." I pulled out a folder of documents that Claire had gathered. Bank statements, emails, and a signed complaint from Naomi's former employer. Naomi's eyes narrowed as she snatched the folder from my hands. "This is blackmail," she hissed. "It's leverage," I corrected. "You leave us alone and this stays between us. But if you try anything else, this goes to the police." For the first time, Naomi looked genuinely shaken. She threw the folder onto the bed and stormed out without another word. The relief was short-lived. A week later, Ethan confronted me in the kitchen. "Something's not right," he said, his tone cold and accusing. "What are you talking about?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "You and Liam," he said bluntly. "I've seen the way he looks at you, and the way you look at him." My blood ran cold. "Ethan, that's ridiculous." "Is it?" he snapped. "Because I don't think it is. I think there's something going on, and I want the truth." I felt the walls closing in around me. "There's nothing to tell," I said quietly. But Ethan didn't believe me. His accusation lingered in the air, heavy and oppressive. His eyes bore into mine, searching for a crack in my defense. "There's nothing going on," I said again, forcing my voice to remain steady. "He's your brother. How can you even think that?" Ethan didn't blink. "I know what I see, Olivia. Don't insult my intelligence." The tension in the room was suffocating. I felt my composure slipping. "Ethan," I said, trying to redirect, "if there's something bothering you, let's talk about it. But throwing baseless accusations around..." "Baseless?" His voice rose, cutting me off. "Then why is Naomi saying otherwise?" My stomach dropped. Ethan nodded sharply. "She called me. Told me some things I didn't want to believe. Said she had proof." I took a deep breath. "She's angry that Liam moved on from her. She's trying to cause trouble. And you're saying there's nothing to her story?" Ethan's voice was edged with doubt. I held his gaze. Nothing. For a moment I thought he might believe me, but then he turned and walked out of the room without another word, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding in my chest. That night, Liam came to my room, his face pale, his movements tense. "What's going on?" he asked, closing the door behind him. "Ethan knows something," I said, my voice trembling. "Naomi must have gotten to him before we stopped her." Liam sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clenched into fists. "What do we do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But if he finds out the truth..." "He won't," Liam said firmly. "We won't let him." But I could see the fear in his eyes mirroring my own. The next evening, Ethan insisted we have dinner together as a family. It was rare for him to make such a request, and the forced civility of it set my nerves on edge. The three of us sat at the dining table, the clink of silverware against plates the only sound for long stretches of time. "So, Liam," Ethan said suddenly, breaking the silence, "how's the job search going?" Liam looked up, caught off guard. "Fine. I've been looking at a few opportunities." Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good. I was starting to wonder if you planned on staying here indefinitely." The comment was pointed, and Liam stiffened. "It's not like I'm in your way," he said quietly. Ethan's gaze flicked to me, then back to Liam. "No. But I think it's time you move on, don't you?" I opened my mouth to intervene, but Ethan held up a hand. "I think we've all gotten a little too comfortable with this arrangement. It's not healthy." Liam stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "If you've got something to say, just say it." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression cold. "Fine. I think it's time for some honesty from both of you." My heart pounded as Ethan's eyes locked onto mine. The room seemed to shrink around me as I struggled to find the words to diffuse the situation. But before I could speak, Liam stepped forward. "Nothing to say," he said, his voice firm. "Naomi's lying. She's trying to mess with us because I broke things off with her." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "And why would she involve Olivia in her lies?" "She's desperate," Liam said. "She'd do anything to get back at me, and dragging Olivia into it was just the easiest way to hurt me." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "And you expect me to believe that?" "Yes," Liam said, "because it's the truth." For a long moment the room was silent. Then Ethan stood, his movements slow and deliberate. "Maybe it is," he said finally, "but I'm not convinced. And until I am, I think it's best if you find somewhere else to stay." Liam looked at me, his eyes filled with an unspoken question. I wanted to tell him to stay, to fight this together, but I knew it would only make things worse. "It's fine," Liam said quietly. "I'll go." The house felt emptier without him. Ethan seemed satisfied with Liam's absence, though his suspicion toward me hadn't entirely dissipated. I called Liam every day, though our conversations were brief and strained. He had rented a small apartment on the other side of town and was trying to focus on work, but I could hear the frustration in his voice. "I hate this," he said one night. "Being away from you, letting her win." "It's temporary," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. But the distance was taking its toll. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Naomi made her final move. One afternoon, while I was out running errands, she showed up at Ethan's office. She didn't have proof, but she had just enough of the story to sow doubt in his mind. When I returned home, Ethan was waiting for me in the living room. "Sit down," he said, his tone icy. I obeyed, my hands trembling in my lap. "Naomi came to see me," he said. "She told me everything, or at least enough to make me question what you've been telling me." "Then she's lying," I said quickly. "Is she?" he snapped, "because it's starting to feel like everyone's lying to me." The room was silent for what felt like an eternity. Then he stood and walked to the door. "I'm leaving," he said. "Don't bother calling me until you're ready to tell me the truth." Ethan didn't come home that night, or the night after. I tried calling, but he didn't answer. The house felt unbearably quiet, and for the first time, I wondered if I had truly lost everything. Liam came over a few days later, his concern evident as he stepped through the door. "Are you okay?" he asked, pulling me into a tight embrace. "I don't know," I admitted, tears streaming down my face. I don't know." He stayed with me that night, and for a moment it felt like things might be okay. But the damage had been done, and I knew our lives would never be the same.